Hey guys, Star Tutors here to give you an inside look at our ACT and SAT virtual classrooms. It all starts with a live Facebook stream privately shared with your account. If any comments, questions, or concerns come up while participating in the class, virtual students can use the comments section to ask our teachers anything they need, and our teachers and teaching assistants will respond to these questions in real time. Our virtual classroom can be accessed anywhere around the world, and all classroom lessons are recorded and posted in the Facebook forum for students to re-watch if additional preparation is needed. Stay tuned for a 30-minute demo of our virtual classroom.
Okay, so this is the first section of the test. You guys probably, but for those of you that took the practice test yesterday or who have taken a practice test or a real test even in the past, the English introduction is very important. English is by far the section that is by far the easiest section, in my opinion, and most people's opinions, and should be the one that if you put the time in and you're very disciplined in understanding and learning a proper grammar and proper sentence structure, you should be able to improve the score very quickly depending on how disciplined you are. So the English section is 45 minutes long, and is 75 questions. Those questions are broken up into two types: grammar, punctuation, verb tense, anything that your sixth grade English teacher told you to learn and you probably never did. It would be very hypocritical of me to say that I was focused on grammar in sixth grade or whenever we learned that stuff, because I was so in one ear out the other. So I feel your pain if you're not ready for grammar, but we'll get through it. And then sentence structure or main ideas, we'll call those rhetorical skills, but I'll just write sentence structure for now. Sentence structure, main ideas. It's really more of a main ideas. It's more of a reading comp section. Is organization. And you guys are probably familiar with these. These are the ones that are like, if sentence 1 were deleted, the paragraph would primarily lose whatever, right? Hopefully everybody's familiar with those if you've taken a practice test. Cool? Does anybody have any questions on the English introduction? I hope not, but if somebody does, let us know. There are 15 questions per passage, 5 passages, 5 times 15. We'll get to this in the math section. If we're in 5 times 15 is 75 questions. Okay, so 5 passages with 15 questions each. Question number 1 is just as important as question number 75. Okay, question number 2 is just as important as question number 75 and vice versa. There's no question on the ACT that's worth more than another. Not one question on the entire test. It's very important to recognize that, because if you get to a hard problem, if you get to a question like, oh shoot, I wish I would have memorized that punctuation lesson that Chase told me to, right? If you get to that question, just move on. 74 out of 75 questions, if you get 74 questions right, which means you can miss one obviously, will still get you a 36 on the test. That will get you a perfect score and you can miss one question. Okay? And that leads me into the next point that I want to talk about. Before we get into too much English and all that grammar stuff, right? Stuff that's less fun than thinking about getting a high score on the test. I want you guys to be very familiar, and we'll bring this up a lot during the course of the 5 weeks. I want you to be very familiar with ACT scoring. Okay? For those of you that are in an AP class right now, this is what we call a bell curve. Okay? And what a bell curve means is that this test is graded on a curve. Okay, you might have had a curve in some of your classes. Generally speaking, so like let's say if you got a 52 out of 60, the math test is 60 questions long, you got a 52 out of 60 on the math test. In school, this would be what? Like an 87, this would be an 87.33%, I think. Okay, so that's an 87.33% in school. Is that right? 52 out of 60? Yeah. I think so. I think that's right. 87.33%. On the test, on the math test, if you get a 52 out of 60, that would be the equivalent of an ACT score of about a 32, which is in turn in the 98th percentile. So the reason I bring this up is because this is very much not like school. Okay, this is a 10%, and again, it gets, as you get more questions right, this number shrinks, but this is a 10% curve to what you're used to in school. 52 out of 60 questions, if you were to go back in the back of your book, your ACT official guide. In fact, we can do that right now. Taking this book, hopefully everybody has this in front of them. Taking your official guide, can everybody turn to page Can everybody in this book turn to page 636? Can everybody turn to page 636 in this book? I'm going to give you one of these too. I'm going to go off of you since I'm stuck in myself.
Yeah. There's one right behind me.
There you go. Okay. See, could you go to 636? I'm going to ask you a few questions on it.
For sure.
Okay, so Anna's sitting here. I'm going to ask her a few questions. You guys can obviously chime in. Feel free to comment as much as you'd like. But Anna's sitting back here. Anna, can you tell me what 52 questions out of 62 questions is in terms of ACT scoring?
What 52 questions is on this test?
Yep.
A 33.
On this test, on practice test 3 in your ACT Red Book, right? Practice test 3 on your ACT Red Book, you'd get a 33, which is actually in the 99th percentile, right? You get a 33 if you missed 8 questions. In school, you'd get an 87.33. On this test, you'd get a 99. That's pretty good, right? That you take that curve almost every day of the week, hopefully. Okay, the reason I bring this up and the reason that that's so important is because you don't need to get every question right. Anna, your TA, scored in the 99th percentile herself for this test. And you know why? It wasn't because she needed to memorize every question, although she might have. I don't think so. It was because she was a really good test taker and understood things like this. Okay? Every one of us has to understand this. Has to understand this 10% gap. If you understand that, then suddenly moving on from a question isn't so hard. Same thing with English. Anna, what's the English score if you miss 10 questions?
If you missed 10 questions?
Yeah.
28, 29.
Okay, so 65 out of 75 on the English section, which is what we're going to start with today.
28.
It's a 28 on this test. So 28. The English curve is the weakest. So you get it's the hardest to improve. But sometimes if you get a hard English test, you can miss 3 or 4 English questions and still get a perfect score. In any case, this is a 28. One of the other common misconceptions of the ACT test is that a 28 is not a goal score. That I have to get a 30 plus or I'm not that smart. That is we see it all at the time. Anna and I teach ACT students every day of the week, okay? And everybody says 28. Why am I just getting a 28? A 28 is in the 90th percentile. 90th percentile nationwide. If you score a 28 on this test, you get a 90%. That is very, very important to acknowledge. Because if you get a 28, on it to improve from a 28 to a 36, who do you have to compete with?
The top 10%.
You have to compete with the top 10% of the nation. So getting to a 28, if you're wondering, if you ever take this test, or even if you're at sometimes people get to a 25. So if you're at a 25 right now, oops, that's horrible, 25, right? If you're at a 25 right now, a 25 is in the, just a second, I can tell you, I can ballpark it. A 25 is in right around like the 78th percentile. A 25, and everybody says like, oh, 25, I need to raise my score, or if I'm at a 20 is in the, if you're at a 20 right now and you're trying to improve your score, you're already above average, which is, so again, you're already above average. This is really important to recognize, that if you really want to improve from a 25 to a 36, 11 points, you're competing against the top 22% of the country. That is very important to recognize. If you're not a natural test taker and you're at a 25 and you want to improve, you have to work twice as hard as somebody that is a natural test taker. So the whole notion of like, oh, I'm not a good test taker, this test is not based on testing ability. It's based on who wants it the most. Yeah, some people, this is going to be in general, this is going to be in life. Some people are going to be better at something than you are naturally, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be the best. Because you can always work harder. You can always work harder. If you're at a 25 and you're at a 78%, you have to compete with the top 22% of the country in order to improve from a 25. That's hard to do. I just want you guys to recognize that, so that rather than saying, oh, I only have a 25, you have to think, I'm at a 25, that's awesome. And now I have to compete with a pretty high caliber student. Likewise, as you go higher, it only gets harder. right? A 32, if you're at a 32, right, that's in the 98th percentile. To go from a 32 to a 36, you have to improve 4 points in the top 2%. 33 is in the 99th percentile. The 33, 34, 35, 36 are all competing in the top 1%. 1% goes from 33 to a 36. That's insane. Okay, and the reason I bring this up is so that you guys can understand scoring, you can be very transparent with yourselves, and you can try to get better. And not say, oh, I only got a 25. If you started with a 22, you've already improved 3 points, and you've already improved almost 20 percentile points. Now think, how am I going to get to a 28, and I'm going to be in the 90th percentile when I get to a 28? Think about it that way, and this test doesn't seem so daunting. Believe me, guys, I work with students every single day. I have for 6 years, and it's brutal to have to watch because I know what the stress is. I know what the commitment is. I just, I know what the commitment is, and I just want you guys to make sure that you are that you understand and know that this is true for everybody. Everybody is under this. You guys are under this kind of extreme stress, and I understand that. And there's a lot, and everybody says junior year is so hard, and it is so hard. And you guys are, again, kudos to you guys for pushing through this stuff. For those that are going into senior year, great job finishing up. 11th grade is brutal. 10th grade is hard. And thinking about this college stuff and thinking I got to get a 34, I'm not going to get into XYZ school, it's going to be overwhelming no matter what. That is going to be an overwhelming thought. It's overwhelming for me, and I'm not even taking the test officially. Okay, so I just want you guys to be thinking about that as you continue to move on. What can I do to improve my score? 1 point. One question. There's 215 questions on this ACT test. 215 total questions. Okay? If you're at 197, how are you going to get to 205? That's got to be your thought process. If you're at 197, how are you going to get to 205? Because if you're thinking that way, suddenly it's, oh, I got to get this next question right. Rather than thinking, if I don't get a 34, I don't go to Georgetown. If you think that way, the test has already defeated you. You're already not as strong of a test taker as you would be if you were thinking like this. So the first time you took your test, whatever it was, if it was a 25, if it was a 19, if it was a 16, think about how many questions did I get right to get a 16. And how am I going to get 20 more questions right so that I get a 24 next time? And then 20 more questions right. Again, what did I say at the beginning? I said that this test is finite. What I mean by that is that there's 215 questions. You can't go above that. It is finite. There is an ending. If you show yourself that you can get 5 more questions right than you did the last time, eventually you'll max out. You have to hit 215. There's only so many questions. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that note? Please ask questions on that note, because everything else to this point, up until we just finished this little lecture, has been somewhat boring, and I understand that. But this is very, very important. This concept, this idea of the scoring system is very important, so that rather than thinking, I got to get this score, you're thinking, I got to get this many questions right. If I got 140 questions right, I have to get 160 right next time. And Chase is going to do everything in his power, Anna's going to do everything in her power, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen. That's the only way to conquer this test. And I know that it works. I know that it works because, again, 1 in 5,000 gets a perfect score. It gets 215, really 210 to 215 questions right. 1 in 5,000. And 2 in 20 in this exact same program that you're going through right now, 2 in 20 have gotten 210 to 215 questions right. That's pretty good numbers for you guys to be in this program. That's pretty good odds for you guys to improve your score. But every single student that we've had that has done this, and really, I shouldn't even say this is for 36s. We've had quite a few students get 33 plus lately. And that is because they're thinking like this. They're thinking, if I have 200 questions right, how am I going to get 201 questions right? Please think like that, because it's amazing how well that will help you with your test. Is that cool? Does anybody have any questions? And that was a lot of talk. Okay, let's move on. We're going to put this book away for a second. And we're going to just focus on English. Could everybody turn to page 4 really quickly? We're not going to spend too much time here. Can everybody turn to page 4 in their English Star Tutors tutorial? Page 4. Okay, page 4, there's just 2 things I want to talk about. The first one is our happy face at the bottom. If it's a happy face topic, it generally means that it's pretty easy. Fortunately, again, not that I'm the greatest teacher in the world, but I do know this book inside and out. I know what the happy face topics are, so I know where to move, so you guys don't have to worry about this one as much. The magnifying glass is very important. If you see a magnifying glass, that's a horrible magnifying glass. You see a magnifying glass, that's not any better. But if you see this magnifying glass, it means it's a technique identification. This is how Anna and I have taken this test. This is how we've done well on this test. We're able to identify things. Some of them are subconscious. Not all of these questions anymore, and in high school did we have to really think about. But some of them we do, and we still do. There are still questions on math, there are still questions on English that we see every day, and we're like, geez, that's a pretty hard punctuation question. That's why you need to know what this magnifying glass means. If you see this in the tutorial, if you see this, and it is listed throughout, it means it's an identifier. So it means that when you see that same type of question on the test, we want you to be able to think back, okay, we did that in class, we did that as a lesson problem and as a homework problem. How do I apply that to the regular test? And I'll show you guys what that looks like here in a second. Okay? So without further ado, let's move on. And let's turn to page 6. So 6 in verb tense. Anybody have any questions yet? If not, I hope you guys have some verb tense questions. Okay? There are 3 primary tenses in the English language. We're not going to talk about them too much because you guys know them pretty well. Future, present, and past. Okay, future, present, and past. Although most people say past, present, future. I don't know. I always think of the future. Just kidding. I don't. I don't know why I listed it like that. But past, present, future is the three tenses. Sometimes you see things that we call, so what's generally in the English language called the past participle, the past perfect and the present perfect. We're going to call those the past of the past, past of past, and recently to present. Okay, and those would recently to present for the English majors out there. That's what would be called the present perfect and the past perfect. The past of the past and the recently to present are when we say things like I had been doing something or I have been doing something, HAV. So I had been doing something, past of the past. You guys can see this on the bottom of page 6. On the bottom of page 6 it says the past of the past. Again, we're not going to focus on these 3 because I hope that you guys have a strong enough understanding of these at this point. The past of the past, when we say I had been doing something. Had been. If you see this as an answer choice, had been or had been doing something, had being the key word, you know that the entire rest of the passage has to be in the past tense. Okay, otherwise this answer choice is incorrect. If the passage is in the present tense and you use the term I had, it's incorrect. Likewise, if you say I have been doing something, have been, this is what we call recently to present. Okay, if I have been doing something, the entire passage has to be in the present tense. I have been studying for the ACT for what seems like an eternity. I actually think that's the end. I have studied for the ACT for what seems like an eternity. That was the past of the past, but I have been studying also works. I have been studying indicates that you started something in the past and you have since moved on into the present. Is that cool? Again, I don't want to spend too much time on verb tense. Just make sure that you guys are looking at other parts of the passage to see if it's in the past, present, or future tense. If it is in the past tense, then you can use the past of the past, had been. You can look for that as an answer choice. If you're in the present tense, then you can look for the recently to present. If you're in the present tense, where the present perfect, I have been doing something. for what seems like forever. You're assuming you're still doing it right now. You're in the present tense, but you started in the past. So look out for those. This is what we call verb tense. This is tested on the ACT and is tested pretty frequently, maybe 3 to 4 questions on the English section. Okay? Good news for you guys, good and bad news. We're going to comb through every single grammar question that you can possibly see on the test. That's not going to be fun, I can tell you that right now. But if you do it, you're going to get a good score. These scores that we've had lately for the virtual classrooms are no fluke. They're the real deal, and they're the real deal only because students have been very, very attentive to what we're going through here. Look for verb tense. Look for what tense the passage is in that you're reading. This is in the English section. For those of you that need to have some crossover to see what we're talking about, to see some real application, can everybody turn in this book, or you don't have to, but if you're looking for the application of this stuff, can everybody turn to page 342 in this book? Anna, what does it say, starting with it, on the top of 342, second paragraph, or start of the first? What is it? How does it say?
It was exhausting to spend every day in the hot summer temperatures while pretending to be a person whom had lived in a different country and century. Okay, perfect. There's our past of the past. That's pretty wild. I didn't mean to do that. That was just a total fluke. But it said, I was exhausted. It was exhausting. Was is in what tense, Anna? Past. And then what do we see later in that paragraph passage? Whom had lived.
Whom had lived. There you go. There's the past of the past. Had lived. Oh, look at that. Whom had lived, right? So we know right away that this is okay. That had is okay, but have is not. It doesn't mean that it has to be the past of the past. We could still just use the past tense, but at least we're on the right track. Does that make sense, everybody? Hopefully that makes sense. It's somewhat confusing the first time you think about it, but it's not. This shouldn't be that bad because again, you're just looking for the paragraph tense. Okay, that's verb tense. That's verb tense in a nutshell. The best part about this, guys, is that you speak English every day. We don't have to spend too much time talking about this. But if you're going to look for verb tense problems similar to the one that we just coincidentally saw, we saw actually 24 and 25 on that page 342 that we just looked at. 24 and 25 are both verb tense problems. If you see verb tense if you see verb tense problems on the ACT, there's going to be a tense to the paragraph. That's what we're going off of. And then the answer choices and the underlined piece of the question on the English section. You guys saw this yesterday, or you've seen this on a past test. The underlined piece of the English section is going to be a verb. It's going to have some different tenses of the verb. Had lived, were living, and you have to choose between them. Think about these rules. Okay, again, I don't like to spend too much time on verb tense because it ultimately, I feel bad for the students that I first worked with 5 or 6 years ago out of this book because I spent so much time talking about this, and you guys know verb tense. Past, present, future, past, present, future. Past, present, future are things that you guys have talked about for a long time. It's not something that we have to comb through. You use it every single day of your life when you're speaking to your friends. I don't want to talk about it too much, but think about what tense the other points of the question or the passage are talking about, and that will help you in verb tense questions. Okay? So on page 8, you'll see for the first time you see verb tense lesson problems. Page 8 of our Star Tutors tutorial. Okay, on page 8. On page 8, 1 through 5 are lesson problems. Anytime you see the term lesson problems, we'll do those together. If you see homework with the circle around it, we're going to write that up here for homework, and we're going to post it in the group as well. Those are homework problems that I want you to go, and I don't want you to do them now, even though I can't definitively say that you're not going to do them now. I would like you to save those for a later time because it's really not helping you if you're doing 10 verb tense lesson problems and then leaving it alone for a week. Do those 5 lesson problems with us now, and then do 5 homework problems, and we'll talk about them next week. Okay, so start with the lesson problems on page 8. I'll give you guys about 3 minutes to complete those, 1 through 5, and then we'll talk about them.
you.
Thank you. Okay, guys, does anybody need any more time? Hopefully that hopefully gave you a little bit of a sense as to how fast you had to be moving. The English section moves pretty quickly. Remember, 45 minutes and 75 questions. That's pretty quick. So you just have to be thinking about continuing to move on. If you get to a hard problem, if you get to a hard main ideas problem, which we haven't talked about yet, but if you get to one of those hard problems, you have to be thinking, I gotta keep going. Every question is worth the same amount of points. I don't want to leave a couple easy ones on the table at the end so that I can keep trying to stumble through this very, very difficult one. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of the timing. So let's go through it. Lesson problems on page 8. Number 1 is D. Number 2 is J. Number 3 is D. Number 4 is G. And number 5 is D. So I'm sure there's some questions. If you guys all got all of those right, particularly one of the questions that I'm thinking of, if you guys got all the questions right, then that's awesome. Please let us know in the comments section. But if not, if you guys have any questions on those, please reach out so that we can talk about it. There's one pretty hard question. One of the questions on these 5 lesson problems would be deemed a level 3 question, which obviously, in order to get in the 30s, you'd have to get a number of these level 3 questions correct. Does anybody know which question would be the level 3? Besides Anna. Anybody? Nice. Yep, Bobby got it. So Bobby, that is correct. Number 1 is a level 3 question. Thank you for being the first one to respond. Level 3. Number 1 is level 3 question, and here's why. You have to be very, very, very careful. Yep, Anime got it too. Yep. So number 1 is very difficult. Number 1 is D, and here's why. Most students, not you guys, but most students will not be detailed enough to read the very last word of that sentence. The last word in that sentence is today, which gives away that question is in the present tense. And so the correct answer is D, displays, not what most people put, C, displayed. Right? Because you built at the turn of the century. When we start with that sentence, built at the turn of the century, we're thinking back to the turn of the century. But we're talking about today, and that makes that question very difficult. So if you got number 1 right, that's great. Kudos to you. D is the correct answer for that one, displays. But that gives you a little bit of a sense as to how difficult these high-level questions are. But if you can get all of the easy questions right, and then you really have time to comb through and make sure that you're reading everything, or more importantly, if you're just really analytical and focused the entire way through, you won't have any trouble with this. If you got all 5 right, great job. That's awesome. If you didn't get all 5 right, that's okay, but just think about how you can better analyze some of the questions as you're reading them. Today, number one is a great example to go through for a lot of reasons, mostly because of that word today at the very end of the sentence. That gives away what the answer needs to be. So great job. Okay.
Why can't number 5?
Oh yeah, sorry, you said it? Oh yeah, Julia said that?
No.
Oh yeah, Julia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was confused with that one.
Like, no.
Yeah, Julia. So why can't number 5 be A? Okay, so taking the time up front to properly plan the project will ensure success. Jumping right in with no planning, however, leads to failure. Okay, so that's a great question. Why can't it be A? Why can't it be present tense? Because this hasn't happened yet. Right? They're saying taking the time up front to properly plan the project will ensure success. Jumping right in with no planning, however, will lead to failure. That's something that when you're projecting out that it hasn't led to failure yet because you haven't done it. It doesn't lead to failure. It will lead to failure. And that's a great point though, actually, Julia, that you brought that one up. Why is that one hard to recognize? Because we misuse it every day in the English language. Right? No question. If you would ask me, and this would be even more so in high school, like true in high school, if you were to say, like, do you correct your friends when they use slang or use improper? And that one's not even bad. That's a very, very normally missed question. If you were to say that, like, nobody, I don't think, but maybe think times have changed, but I don't think any of you guys are going around being like, wait a second, that's will lead. That's not leads, that's will lead, right? Nobody's doing that for the most part. But those are the things that you really have to take a step back and say, this is will lead because it hasn't happened yet, and you're determining something, you're forecasting something out in the future. Hard question. Number 5 is a hard one too. But that's why the answer has to be D and not A. Hopefully that makes sense. Does everybody feel pretty comfortable with verb tense? Okay. Great. So Anna will include this in the Facebook. We'll include this in our group afterwards. But I'm just going to write up the homework if you guys want to start writing it down. Verb tense homework. Anna, what page is that?
9 and 10.
Page 9 and 10. Okay? Verb tense homework, page 9 and 10.
Check out and register for our programs now by visiting www.startutors.net/virtual, and we'll see you in class soon.